we, as you said, we are going now into Mariella's part, which I'm really happy to welcome. And we will discuss about chemistry and wastewater on ZDHC. So Mariella is a senior implementation manager at leading the ZDHC Academy, which is driving capacity building worldwide, and the ZDHC implementation project across the Benelux and Africa. So Mariella, you will share with us an interesting piece of knowledge about chemical and wastewater challenges and how ZDHC, that I will let you present, is helping the industry to tackle these challenges that are quite deep. So welcome. You can do it either in English, either in French, as you wish, but more or less.
I will do in English today, but that's maybe because I still have a jet lag. So, so my French will be very confusing then. In the meantime, by the way, try to get used to the new reactions that you can post via Zoom. So I have the whole time see hearts and clapping hands, and that's the first time that I see them. So if I look shocked, I'm like, okay, I see a lot of thumbs up and stuff. So I think it's really fun.
Everybody's happy to clap your hand and happy for you to join us. So
it's the first time that I see this. It's really funny. But yeah, I'm happy to be here and very grateful to be here again. We always love to interact with the Transformers. Just very short about my background. Like you said, heading the ZDHC Academy for global capacity building in the fashion industry on sustainable chemical management and wastewater management, wastewater treatment. However, background in directly in fashion. So I've been working in the past, and I saw a familiar name in the participants list. I've been working in the past 10 years at G-Star Raw, both at the product side as at the sustainability side. So also have a background in denim and other fashion products. Why this presentation? Because indeed, like Baptiste was also saying, there's still a lot in the news around chemistry and its impact on environment, not only fashion, but also related topics. So we also see from other industrial areas the impact of chemicals and chemical formulations. And more specifically, the fact that we do not focus only, of course, on chemical formulations, isolated as a formulation that's being used in a facility, but the fact that these chemical formulations, when go untreated into the environment, of course, have a huge impact on all different areas of where we actually live in and work with. Water, air, and so forth, soil. So it's not an isolated topic, and that's also sometimes a thing that we tend to forget. So I will shortly first share a small video around ZDHC, and I need to make sure that I open the correct one and that you can also hear it before I will move into my presentation. I have a lot of screens open at the same time. So if I'm correct, you will be...
It's coming, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if my sound will work.
No, I think it's because you have the earplugs on.
No, the problem is that my system says that I need to set up a whole complicated thing. So what I will do, I already said to somebody from the organization as well, I will share the videos later for those who want to review them, because my computer is completely new and the settings are not correct. So I will start my presentation nonetheless. No worries about that. I can share all the videos after the actual presentation has been given. So let me shortly introduce ZDHC as an organization. We are a multi-stakeholder organization that is working globally with a broad range of fashion industry stakeholders. And we've been existing already for, we're now in our 10th, 12th year. So we're not a newcomer to the industry. We actually were, and that was one point that Baptiste also pointed out, we actually started in 2011 when some of our fashion brands within the industry, including G-Star, by the way, were attacked by Greenpeace with their detox campaign. And what did Greenpeace do? Without them, I would say we would not exist as an organization. They looked at the wastewater that came out of some of the textile facilities, not only in China, but also in India, and identified that there were still hazardous chemicals in the water that was discharged into the rivers. And of course, that impacted the communities that worked around and lived around those factories. And in 2011, they identified 11 chemicals that had priority to be phased out, who were extremely dangerous, harmful to the environment and to people. So they started to work on a campaign towards the brands to see if they could bring them up to speed around chemical discharge and to make sure that they started to work on this topic. So at the time, a lot of brands signed a commitment around eliminating those hazardous chemicals from their own supply chains. That commitment was with an end goal 2020. So basically, all the brands were asked to eliminate those chemicals before 2020. Now we're at 2023, so we're already past that time slot. And of course, the work is far from done. There's a lot of brands and suppliers that are doing very well and are very much moving forward in terms of eliminating those hazardous chemicals. But of course, there's a lot of challenges related to that. Not only the fact that there's more and more chemicals added to the list of harmful substances, but as well because the environment itself is not always enabling us to take next steps. So in 2012, after the attack from Greenpeace with their detox campaign, 6 brands actually set up a collaboration together because the issue was so big that they had no clue how to deal with them individually. So they set up a brand collective, I would say, to address this challenge and to start researching and diving into the topic of how to phase out these specific chemicals from their industry. In 2015, it became a foundation and in its state as it is right now as well, where a lot of different stakeholders started to take part in the discussion. So not only brands, but also other stakeholders working within the industry. And we will see that later at one of the other slides. We turned in 2020, because the work is far from done, although we're progressing rapidly and there's a lot of changes already happening, we changed our goal from a finite to an infinite goal. It's continuous development, it's continuous analysis of where issues are found and how they are existing in at the facility level. It's continuous analysis of the problem. So this infinite approach is actually needed to also develop new ways to deal and to tackle with what we find in the industry. What we actually do and what our aim is that we want to make sure that the fashion industry, and especially not only the brands that are actually part of our stakeholder engagement group, but also those outside, will eliminate hazardous chemicals from their global supply chain. And basically by building a foundation, a setup of tools and guidelines and implementation projects that will help to towards sustainable manufacturing. And in the end, of course, to protect workers, consumers, the planet as a whole. Because like what I just said, it is a holistic approach. In general, chemistry is not something on itself, an isolated topic. It's something that impacts a lot of different areas. Now, who do we all collaborate with? And I think this is sometimes really important to see for people who are not aware of the nonprofit stakeholder associations that we are. We work with a lot of different stakeholders, and as the brands that are involved with our program and that help us with the research and the development go from very small, very niche brands to the big brand groups like LVMH and Decathlon and an H&M or Puma. So we have a wide range of stakeholders that support. And these stakeholders are not only in there to implement our tools, but they're also there to help us develop. So all of these stakeholder partners have people involved in our work groups and task teams to support our goal. Next to that, a very important group that we managed to get on board a couple of years ago was the chemical industry. Why? Because they're, of course, the ones that are actually making these formulations or creating these formulations. And if we don't have these on board, how can we actually tackle the problem of the formulations that are coming onto the markets? And of course, what we want to do in the end is replace hazardous chemicals with safer products. And that's where they have a key position to take. We cannot do without the textile and footwear industry, because those are the organizations that are implementing our tools, and as well implement or buying the chemical formulations from the chemical industry. And then we have a wide range of associate partners that we work with and mostly on developing and research. So what are the key ideas behind the framework that we have set up? The biggest important element about our framework is that it should be an aligned global framework. So what we want to avoid is that there's a lot of different frameworks and standards in the industry that are all implemented by different suppliers, and the whole supplier community is basically confused with everything that is out there. So the idea is industry convergence, making sure that all suppliers are using similar frameworks and are adopting similar tools and guidelines to be able to phase out these hazardous chemicals. So it has a very much collaborative and convergence-oriented scope, and it's setting a standard for the industry with an environmental protection focus. What is different from some of the other things that are already happening within the industry, coming back to one of the things again that Baptiste was talking about as well, is that we went from product compliance, so basically REACH compliance, so what type of chemicals are to be found at the end product when it comes out of the production belt, to how can we actually avoid that certain chemicals are actually being used within the facility in itself during the production. So not as much the end product, but the input of chemistry at the beginning of the production process. Just to showcase as well a few other stakeholders that we work with and who are very important. We work a lot with governments and intergovernmental organizations, development agencies. We work together with the United Nations. We work together with associations in different countries. But we work as well together with academia. So we started a lot of collaborations last year with universities and with applied science schools around this topic as well. Mainly because part of the whole process is as well looking at the phase where we make certain choices already in advance. What type of materials are we using? What type of designs are we making? How does that impact my chemical use when I'm putting those the designs into a bill of materials for the facilities? A big jump in terms of collaboration was made last year and the year before, when we actually decided to converge even more as organizations within the fashion industry. And we started the collaboration as 4 big fashion industry partners all together. So since that time, the Apparel Impact Institute, ZDHC, the Textile Exchange, and the SAC work together all in a process and a program to actually look for collective impact, and we do not want to duplicate each other's work. So by putting our minds together and shaking hands and not going our separate ways, we hope that we will be able to work with our supply chain partners in a more accessible and easy way without getting them into all these different positions. And this was a big step for all the organizations, and we're developing a program and a convergence program with some of these partners, and sharing basically our experiences around the implementation at the ground, at the facility level. Now, where does the Academy actually exist of, or the ZDHC as a whole? We have our development team that is creating the guidelines for the industry, together with a lot of the brands and the chemical suppliers and the facilities. So this is very much a guideline standard creation that has been set up. And these guidelines are also all publicly available. And downloadable from the internet. So it's not that you need to be, part of our organization to actually look at these guidelines and implement them. Then we have the ZDHC Academy, which is a capacity building setup and platform that is training worldwide suppliers and other interested parties about sustainable chemical management and wastewater management within the industry. And we have a scaling and adoption angle, which is the implementation hub, where we actually set up projects that are implementing our tools and guidelines and our training on the ground at the facility level. And so to just give an example, we are doing currently a project in Vietnam for central effluent treatment plants that are treating the wastewater. And we're doing that in an industrial area where we actually first train the suppliers, and then slowly we start to work with them to implement guidelines and to eliminate hazardous chemicals from their usage in the process of manufacturing products. And at the end, also testing their water. Now, as I said, more at the beginning, we are aiming at a holistic approach, which means that we look at the input, which chemical products are being used within the facility, and how are they bought, where are they bought, and how are they stored. We look at the process, how are these chemical products actually used during the production process, and does that impact actually the chemical itself? And we look at the output. So when these chemicals are used during the process, how are they treated before they are being discharged into the environment? Are they treated? And are they well treated? So all these areas are part of our complete management system. I will go through this very fast. Of course, it also links to certain sustainable development goals, because water is one of the big sustainable development goals, clean water and sanitation, as well as education, which are highly affected by water that is not treated. So in this case, we were last week as well at the big United Nations Water Conference to discuss the topic of chemical pollutants in water and what it actually does to the rest of the environment. Per category, the input, process, and output, we established certain guidelines for the industry that can be downloaded from the actual website and then implemented based on the implementation guidance that is set next to them. So we have on the input area our ZDHC MRSL, which is really a key product of ZDHC, and which is a list of restricted substances that cannot be used during the production process. It also has a conformance guideline to make sure that people know how to implement this specific MRSL. So we want to make sure that people understand why they're doing it and what they need to change in their buying system to actually be conformant with that ZDHC MRSL list. In the process area, we've created the chemical management system guideline, which is a guideline and a framework that helps suppliers step by step create a sustainable chemical management system at their facility, and also assess that system on a regular basis. And last but not least, we created a wastewater guideline that standardizes wastewater testing approaches, and also shows how to actually work with your wastewater at your facility, how to treat your effluent and your solids, and implement certain guidelines to make sure that your discharge is improving over time. In connection with the wastewater guidelines, there's also an element of sampling and testing involved that we are currently also standardizing. As you can imagine, there is a lot of laboratories out there that all do testing of water. And one lab is not the other lab. They might have some other processes in place, which could actually end up giving different test results. So even the alignment of testing is extremely important. And that's why we also set up sampling and testing guidelines. All these different standards and guidelines, I put in one big overview in terms of, okay, where does it actually fit when it comes to a facility and production design, and where does it totally not fit into? So in the past, we really did not focus too much on design. Why? It was not our scope. It was not our core strength. Our core strength was really in the processes happening in the facility at the facility level, and the input sides and the wastewater treatment. However, we do acknowledge very much that when you're designing, and design came up shortly already in the previous presentation as well, you are able to make choices already that can create certain impacts. And that's why more and more we engage as well with design schools and with design teams within at the brand level to educate them on, okay, if I make choice X, what does it actually do later on at the facility level and at the environmental impact level? Can I make sustainable choices that are more environmental friendly? So it's one of our key points as an academy to really grow that educational work and to make sure that we teach also the production teams and the design teams how to make better decisions in their material choices, as well as in their color choices, et cetera, et cetera. A short sneak peek at the different guidelines that we currently have on our platform. The ZDHC MRSL, as I already said, our manufacturer restricted substance list, which is now broadly used within the industry, our chemical management framework and guidance document, and our wastewater guidelines. And all these different guidelines in the end basically are tunneled into specific platforms that we've created. So to implement the ZDHC MRSL and the ZDHC wastewater guidelines, suppliers and brands can work together in something that we call our ZDHC Gateway, which is a platform that hosts by now thousands of safer chemicals that can be replaceables for hazardous chemicals that are to be found currently in the industry. And suppliers can test and check which type of chemicals they have in their facility and replace them by safer ones that they also find on the platform. And they can upload their test results to see if their choices actually impacted the water that they're discharging. And even if it comes to chemical management system approaches, suppliers can have a look at one of our platforms as well, how far they are with implementing a safer chemical management system within their own facility and what they still need to improve. I'm just shortly going to skip this also in terms of time. About that improvement mechanism, I think that's one of the things that is very important to us as an organization. Water testing, looking at your chemical inventory, is all one snapshot in time. So you can run through your chemical inventory list and see which hazardous chemicals are in there. You can test your water and see which chemicals are still to be found to a certain limit in your wastewater. But that can be different 6 months later because it's not static. Everything is moving. So our documents are moving as well and are being updated continuously. What is very important in there is actually process management, because handling the whole process from input to output and everything in between is where you can continuously evaluate and update what is happening in your facility, assess and adjust. And I think that's one of the key components that I would always want to highlight. You cannot do these things just once. It's something that's continuously improving. It's looking at what is causing certain failures, certain issues in your products and your wastewater, and adapting to that again. And that's something that's being done on a yearly basis, multiple times a year. And that whole cycle of reviewing, that's something that needs to stay in place. And that's why we feel that a system framework that should be adopted in a facility is essential to the change that you can make at the ground, on the ground. So what does, for example, such a framework look like? So the essence of a chemical management system always has certain aspects. It has a lot of aspects around setting up policies for your facility, strategies, as well as assessment frameworks to go through your facility a couple of times a year to see if everything is actually in place. And it's also showing commitment, not only as a chemical responsible at a facility, but also from the management, for example. Then there's also the implementation part. What does it look like in terms of health and safety in my facility? Is everybody protected well enough when they're handling chemicals? What does my chemical inventory look like? And how do I store and handle these chemicals? Maybe, one of the other events, I should show more pictures of what a storage can actually look like and why you want to improve storages that have a certain lack of organization and even leakages in terms of hazardous chemicals. And then there's that last and very important element of reviewing and updating, output management, and making sure there's process control and continuous improvement in place. Now, what we established, because we really saw that sometimes it's very hard for suppliers to actually work with that, and that's one of my last slides, by the way. We established a supplier platform that can actually help a supplier to evaluate how they're doing in terms of chemical management. But next to that, and I think that's something that we always find very important, it also gives 150, by now even more, I think, cases and guidance sheets to actually show how you can improve yourself as a facility. And even other facilities put those cases on their platform. So what did I do that actually improved my work at my facility? And how can I share my experiences with my peers? Because in the end, you learn best, I think, from each other. And that's what we could try to stimulate in our trainings, as well as in our supplier engagement. Work together and show to each other what improvement looks like. And share that. I mean, although you're potentially competing in terms of products, are you also competing in terms of environmental impact? I hope so. I hope that you don't. I mean, I don't hope so. I said I hope so, but I don't hope. I really don't think you should be competing on that topic. So really, as brands, as suppliers, look at each other, how you are improving in that sense, and share best practices. And that's what we try to do with the supplier platform and the training, making sure that those best practices are shared within the industry and that you can work together towards solutions. And that is basically our improvement cycle. So evaluate, assess what you are doing as an organization, train your teams, what they can still improve on the ground at your facility. Look at help, look at other brands, colleagues, friends, experts out there in the industry to improve yourself, and then do the whole cycle over and over again. Unfortunately, it will be something that you need to do continuously to keep up to speed with all the things that are happening on the ground. I just wanted to share one video more, which I will share with everybody who's actually in the call, which I think is really essential to see if you're interested in the work of ZDHC, which is River Blue. It's available now finally on YouTube as well, but it's a very interesting movie that actually shares with everybody that has not deep dive chemical management knowledge, I would say, what the impact of chemicals in wastewater and in the environment. So if you're very much into this topic and you find it's very interesting to explore, do have a look at River Blue as well, and see what you can learn from that in terms of impacts of facilities in the textile industry. With that, I would like to finalize my
thank you very much.
Presentation, Stephane, because I could talk about this for hours, you know that.
Merci beaucoup, Mariella. Thanks a lot for this. Let's go for the Q&A session. We do have two questions. that we can raise together. We'll first start with the one from Thomas. So thanks again for your presentation. About denim dyeing or washing, do you know if there are types of dyes or chemicals that are commonly used and that you think should be replaced by better ones? So Thomas has in mind enzymes that replace pumice stones or which are much better for sustainability.
Mute. That's a very good question. And to be honest, I would almost say I give it to Miguel, who's actually on the call as well, because I am not, just to be very honest, Thomas, I am not a chemist. However, working more in the field of chemical management and not as much in the field of actual chemistry. So I'm not sure actually if Miguel, for instance, wants to take this question, but yes, there is in denim, also definitely certain chemicals used more than others, by the way, that could definitely be replaced. And we are working towards, together, by the way, also with Transformers, on specific guidelines around denim and its chemicals and replacements. Not only the chemistry, by the way, but also processing. What I would say is that yes, there is still a need for that, and I would not only say in terms of dyeing, but also indeed of applications. I would be happy to share more about that as well in terms of what we're developing as guidelines and training around that topic too, because there is a lot being developed right now with the Transformers Foundation on this topic.
Okay, thank you. Let's go. We have two more questions. One from Lily. The introduction of production design is pretty new, but do you think that they should or will come to learn in mod school? So more or less, that's why we are here today, yeah? Speaking about how to share our key insight with schools. But yes, how do ZDHC more or less is also helping students or school, or how you do it?
Yeah, well, I would almost say funny enough, indeed. And I like the fact that you say, do you think they should be, will they learn that? Or do you think they will learn that? Some schools are more open to it than others. So that's why we try to emphasize it as well to students that are interested to do it. Make sure to communicate it as well internally at your educational facilities or your schools, because we are supporting a lot of applied science schools and universities, design schools, with adapting their curriculum more towards these topics. So how can you make indeed more sustainable design choices, and how can this also in the end support designers that are going to work at brands that are actually applying this already. So it's also it's very important for your career as well as a designer to be able to think along with brands in this area. So we're trying to do that more and more, and are very open as well to universities and schools that would like to work with us on this topic. So yeah, doing the best. But to be honest, there is some schools that are really hesitant to still look at this topic because they think it's too complicated, or they're a bit scary of it. And yeah, it's not rocket science. You need to tell the story because it's, there is no way back from it anymore. So as a design school, you will need to pick it up for sure. And
this we'll try to work it out with the Transformer and French schools.
Absolutely, so, yeah.
And for the French schools. Last question from Marie. Are you working toward aligning your guidelines and framework with the EU regulatory framework? So the link with Baptiste is done. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a very important topic. What we do a lot is indeed, as we talk a lot with policymakers, we do try to align as much as possible with regulatory frameworks. The only thing is that as ZDHC, at some point we decided that we want to go beyond, because currently the regulatory frameworks are focused on what is happening with end product testing and end product restricted substances, not as much yet on the topic of actually products that are being bought and used during the process of production. So we do go a step further. However, we of course don't want to make it more complicated in terms of what is being done within the regulatory frameworks. So we also don't try to deviate too much from it, in the sense that we go so much beyond that it's almost impossible to implement ours. So there's a lot of discussions going on, definitely at the UN and the EU level, to make sure that we stay aligned on the topic. Yeah.